My name is Duggan. I'm the youth director at First Methodist Carlsbad. I'm so excited to get to share a little bit of what God is doing in my life, what God has done in my life, and what God is going to continue to do in my life. But before I start, I think there's two important pieces of context for you to know about me to fully comprehend and understand my story. The first one is that I grew up in church. As Bill said, I went to church camps growing up. I went to Sacramento Youth Camp out there, which I actually have the luxury and privilege of taking around 50 students to next week with my youth group. So I'm really pumped about that. And so I grew up in church. But the second thing that I think is important for you to understand about me and just what God has done in my life is that from a very young age, I began to kind of understand that I was very different from most of the kids that were my age. And I was different in two different ways. The first way that I was different is I was good at pretty much everything. I could sing. I was in the all-state choir. I could play the piano. I was very athletic. I was a part of a lot of sports teams. I was well-spoken and dynamic, as Bill, showed us. I love public speaking, which is the number one fear I learned in people the other day from Kelly, and that's not something that I'm necessarily afraid of. And I was smart. I was charismatic. I loved people, and I just found myself excelling at pretty much everything that I did. And this is the moment where you may say, "Man, that guy's really arrogant." And man, I think the reason why I wanted to share that is because it puts this next statement in context, that no matter how much people told me that I was great at everything, and no matter how great I was at all the things, I didn't really feel all that great. I wrestled in my heart with this deep-rooted insecurity, with deep-rooted depression. My parents, as recently as preschool, as early in my life as preschool, told me that I would say things like, "No one loves me," "I hate me," I want to die, "I don't want to be here." It was kind of an oxymoron in my life. And I kind of wrestled and wondered growing up in church, man, God, why would you make me this way? Where I was so good at everything and yet I felt so inadequate. I felt like I was good at absolutely nothing. And this was a feeling that persisted in my life even up until 6th grade when I was at Sacramento Youth Camp for the first time, and I had a salvation moment in my life where I surrendered my life to Jesus. Put my hands up, I said, "Jesus, you are my Savior." And in that moment in my life, I left out a very important aspect of what following Jesus was, and that was Him being the Lord of my life. I knew a lot about Jesus, but I didn't let Jesus fully transform my heart in that season of life. And I liken it to, I was driving in a car in my life, and at this moment in my life was when I opened the door and I let Jesus get into the passenger seat. And Jesus was driving with me throughout my life in this moment, but I was still behind the wheel of the car. And because I was behind the wheel of the car and I was driving throughout the course of my life, we drove to some very scary places. It was not the greatest time of life. And because I was feeling these deep-rooted insecurities, these deep-rooted sadness and depression, I steered us to places where I was hoping to solve these problems. This led to places in my life where I would pursue lust and pornography. I was pursuing relationships with girls where I would cross lines. I was pursuing friendships that just were not God-honoring whatsoever. And I actually got to a place where, because of the places where I drove us in the car, I actually was ready for my life to end. And so I got a knife and I put it to my chest. And I was ready to commit suicide before, by the grace of God, my mom actually walked into the room and saved my life. And I would love to tell you that this was a transformative experience for me, and man, God radically changed me, but that wasn't it for that moment in my life. Because I went into my high school years, into my freshman year of high school, ready to take my life again, in large part this time because of my circumstances. Because I found myself in a space where these friends that I had surrounded myself that weren't very good, where these girls that I was surrounding myself who weren't very good, actually turned their back on me because my high school girlfriend cheated on me with my best friend. Yeah, real bummer. And during this season, I had a week period of my life where my parents found out about the decisions that I was making, and they were extremely disappointed in me. I lost my best friend, and I lost my girlfriend who I had placed a lot of my identity in, and so I reached a place in my life where I genuinely felt alone. And not just because of an internal reality, but also because of an external reality in my life. And so I actually went to attempt suicide again. And I got the rope, I tied it up, and I sat in front of it. And in this moment, my phone started to ring. And I turned over and I looked at the phone, and it was that best friend. And I said, I don't want to talk to him. And so I was just like, in my heart, I said, whenever the phone stops ringing, that's when my life is going to stop. And for 30 minutes, that phone did not stop ringing. It would just keep going and keep going and keep going. And those same friends that were terrible influences on my life, God actually used to be the ones that saved my life. And I answered the phone, and that same friend that my girlfriend had cheated on me with said, hey, I'm sorry, man, we love you. We are here for you if you need anything. And once again, I would love to tell you that this is the moment where God radically transformed my heart posture, but it wasn't. Because I was still ready to run away again. And so we get to my sophomore year of high school on January 24th of 2019, and I was ready once again to end my life. And I reached a moment where I just radically encountered God, because as Philippians 1:21 says, to live is Christ, but to die is gain. For me, the dying part was the easy part. I was ready for that. But God showed me something in this moment. That when Jesus died on the cross, he died for the right to choose how I live. To choose when I live and to choose when I die. That he died for the right to define every aspect of my life. And in that moment, he transformed my heart, as Ezekiel says, from a heart of stone to a heart of flesh. To where I began to feel and to understand that living is the part for Christ. And so in that moment, I believe I actually stepped into Jesus being the Lord of my life. And I liken this to I finally became the passenger princess in the car of my life. Jesus hopped into the driver's seat. And that was an absolute blessing, and things began to radically transform in my life. I started to understand that, man, these feelings in my heart weren't what defined my worth, but Jesus was. And I would love to say that those feelings have completely disappeared in my life. Unfortunately, to this point, that has not been a wall that has fallen in my life yet. And I've been diagnosed with major depressive disorder, which is a chemical imbalance in my brain that I still wrestle with even today. But praise God, I don't wrestle alone, because God is with me in that, every single step. But as I progress forward through life, knowing that, hey, that this is a struggle for me, but God is with me in it. God, you have empowered me to do your good work. I had another issue in my life, which is the thing I said was important for context, and it was that I was pretty much good at all the things that I did. And on the surface, that seems like a real blessing until you try to figure out what you want to do with the rest of your life. And then suddenly that's a real curse, because you're not really sure what to do. Right? I had no idea. And the easiest thing that my parents had spoken over me was, hey, Davis, you're really smart. You should go do what the smart people do, right? And then what the smart people did, as a lot of you probably were told as a kid, you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you're an engineer. Now, I'm not great at math, so engineering was out. We were done with that. But my dad, my uncle, my grandpa, they're all lawyers. So I decided, hey, maybe I can do this whole lawyer thing and I can begin to pursue this. But whenever COVID hit, God really began to speak to my heart and say, hey, I don't think that I want you to be in law, because I want you to be in the business of healing. And that was kind of just what was spoken over me during that season. And I believed that this meant, okay, I need to go be a doctor. And so I decided to really pursue that hard. And I went to college at Texas Tech University. Any Red Raiders in here? Wreck 'em? Yeah, I love it. I love it. So I went to college at Texas Tech University as a biochemistry major with the hopes of being a pediatric surgeon. That was what I believed God had for my life. And I was so excited about it, and I was so ready for it. And I jumped in, and to be honest, I loved it. I did. I shouted a surgeon. It was amazing. I really just thought that was what God had for my life, until I went home to my sister's graduation. And I saw my 7th grade biology teacher. And we just kind of were catching up, and he said, hey, Davis, what are you doing right now? Like, what's going on in your life? And I shared with him, hey, I'm at Texas Tech. I'm a biochemistry major. I want to be a pediatric surgeon. And he laughed in my face. And obviously I was offended and kind of hurt. I'm like, hey, why are you laughing at me? I think this is what God asked for me. And he said something so powerful. He said, Davis, I don't think you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. Whenever you were in the 7th grade, you wrote something on your paper that I have not seen from any other 7th graders about what you wanted to be when you grow up. Do you remember what that was? Clearly I didn't. I had no idea. And he said, Davis, you wrote that you wanted to be a pastor. And I don't think that you're not doing that. And I think that's what you're supposed to be doing. And a popular theme in my story is that I don't really listen when God speaks very well. So I went back to Texas Tech my sophomore year as a biochemistry major. And I kept going through that season of life. But in this season, God revealed to me powerfully that he wanted to use me not in the business of healing bodies, but in the business of healing souls. Because my random college roommate, who I didn't talk to for the first 3 months of living with him, called me that summer after that conversation and said, hey, I think I'm ready to try this Jesus thing. And he was able to come to church with me, and through that experience, he was able to encounter the Lord and give his life to Jesus. And then this sophomore year of college, I was able to receive a phone call from that same best friend from high school that had hurt me so bad, that had been there, God empowering to save my life at my lowest moment. He called me in his and said, Davis, I don't know where to go. And I said, hey, come to Lubbock. Come and live with me. And he did. And in that season of life, I was able to, by the power and grace of God, invite him to church, walk with him through the gospel, and see him surrender his life to Jesus as well. And he is now in full-time ministry. And God used the power of forgiveness in my story to show him his grace that was already working in my friend's life. And in this season, these people that were surrounding me, because I didn't go into college thinking I wanted to do it my own way. God was in the driver's seat of my life at this point. I came in and pursued the Lord with my whole heart. So the community that was around me began to say, Davis, we see these giftings in you. We see all the talents that God has given you, and we believe that every single one of them will be used if you go into full-time ministry. And let me tell you, that could not be more true. I now am able to be, as a youth director, confidently telling you on the stage that God is using each and every one of the gifts that he has gifted me. My ability to play piano and sing has been something that I've been able to lead my youth students in worship each and every week. And we have completely changed the dynamic of worship in our group. It's incredible. The athleticism that I thought, man, I'm not ever going to be a professional athlete, so who cares about that? God uses that for my students, for me to be able to play sports with them at our church camps. I can go play pickleball with my kids and dominate them. It's awesome. It's great. The lack of fear of public speaking and my love for people, I'm able to just see that play out in the way that I can love my students, love our people, get up and share the good news of Jesus here with you guys. Unashamed, unabandoned. I've been able to see my intelligence applied to deep diving into scriptures and teaching these kids deep scriptural holiness and not surface level Christianity. I've been able to see each and every gift that God has placed on my life be applicable here. And suddenly this thing that seemed like such a burden in my life has become such a blessing. And guys, I don't really have much else to say about my story, but God is moving powerfully in my life even now. He's using my story to impact these students' lives. This sadness that sometimes is still present in my life, the numbness, to be something that isn't necessarily great. Right, this weakness. In 2 Corinthians, Paul talks about we take delight in our weaknesses, not because those things are all that great, but because those things force us to lean into just how strong God is. And that's where I'm at right now. Is that even in these seasons and spaces in my life where, man, I might still be weak, I'm able to see just how big my God is in all those places. Thank you, guys.